The Royal Baghdad market was famous throughout the world for its beauty and activity. Here were merchants from every country selling gold, silver, silk, and spices. Organized carts passed by, covered in dust, and the groans of the poor remained buried in this shroud. In a deserted corner near this place, there was a market under an old tree, where poor people used to pay homage in the year of Shikun. His name was Salem. His face had a network of wrinkles that told the story of his long and traumatic life. His eyes were bright, but there was a strange stillness on his face. The clothes on Salem's body were so short and old that they became thinner than the fabric. He was there from morning to evening, but he never extended his hand to anyone. If someone comes of his own accord and puts something in his cup, he says, God will do everything good. And if someone rebuked him, they remained silent. What was surprising was that the people of the market did not call him crazy and honest. When shopkeepers often went to prayer, they would leave this poor man to provide for his precious mother. They were confident that he could neither escape nor betray us. But unfortunately people trusted her, but no one took care of Joey. He protected everyone's trusts, but he often slept with a hungry stomach. One day, Sultan Baghdad's Sultan Zahran came out in disguise to know the condition of his verses. The Sultan was not wearing the clothes of a traveler, Uday, who had dust on his face. His clothes were also simple, and while he was walking around, the Sultan's gaze fell on this poor, illiterate sheikh. The head of the Sultan and a rich merchant came and put down his heavy bag when he asked an article to his door. Pay attention to it a little. I am coming now, just shaking his head. The merchant left, and after a long time, he inadvertently took you away from there without saying anything and without thanking you. Salem did not even say, "Oh." The Sultan was so sad when he saw this scene. He thought, how selfish this world is. They all use this sheikh, but no one is willing to give him a single piece of bread. It came in a ball in the heart of the Sultan. He said to himself, why don't they test this poor man's honesty, a real test? Is he really honest as people think, or is his honesty just forced? Sultan walked slowly until he reached Al-Salem, making his whip heavy and tired, and said, Peace be upon you, Sheikh. He raised his eyes with light as if he was trying to recognize the sound. And peace be upon you, my son, who are you? In a voice like the weariness of exile, the Sultan approached the traveler with his bass and said to the poor man, Father, I have come from a far-away country and I am going on a Hajj trip with me some of my belongings, but I am afraid that on the way the bags will be stolen or a bandit will steal them. I asked many people in this market who is the most honest person, and they all pointed to you. Al-Sal said with a faint smile. My son, there are people who even say to the stone that it is his god. I am just poor or despicable. I cannot protect myself. How can I protect your trust? The Sultan took out the navel from his waist, small but heavy. From the velvet inside this navel, the Sultan placed the rarest jewels and the highest ones from the king's treasury, the price of which could buy an entire city. But the Sultan lied. The Sultan touched Salem's trembling hands to the navel and said, Oh Baba, there is no silver in it, some of my memories of the old house. Some of the stones that I brought from my country have no value, but they are more valuable than my life. I want to leave them in trust with you, and when I return from Hajj, take them. Salem felt the package and found it heavy and said, Boni, if there is no valuable food in it, why don't you take it with you? The Sultan said, Oh Baba, it is a difficult road, and this is a load. I want to travel lightly. I am traveling happily. Your holiday. When I return, I will greet you with peace. He thought that helping a traveler would be rewarded. So he hid the package inside the torn t-shirt. Hassan said, Bonnie, if you have this much confidence in this person, then abandon the trust. It will remain preserved with me, but do not hesitate. The Sultan stood up and said, maybe after a year, maybe after 2 years, and maybe after 5 years, but remember, O Baba, do not fold this bundle for anyone and do not open it in it to make an oath. He asked, then you will come back to me, and be assured that there will always be a soul in my chest, for this trust will remain with me. May God protect you. The Sultan went from there, but he knew that he had not left stones behind this poor man, but rather Azim Kanzan in Sultana. Now the matter was clear in the face of poverty, hunger, and the ravages of time. How would this poor imam be able to fulfill his oath? After the Sultan had gone, Sal's life would not remain as it was. The bundle that the Sultan said was of stones and the remembrance of the ancient yet became for Salem the most powerful burden in the world. A tied Kulkis bearing a robe wrapped around his waist. When he put his hand on it, and when he woke up the first thing he felt for it, he was afraid that it would overwhelm him and curse us, and someone would declare that this was a trust. The days became long, and the long days became months. The seasons changed. Summer came and went. Winter came and went, but that traveler did not return. The people of the market began to turn to Salem with strange looks. They used to see him touching something. Under his shirt, time after time, the yurt was waving, and the boys with stripes began to annihilate it. One day, I will ask a merchant that he will not change. Baba, what did you do with your insides? Did you find a treasure? So Salem was happy and put his hand on his insides and said, no treasure will be built. This is just a traveler's trust, after only the old stones and nothing else. People were shouting and saying, whoever places the stones is a trust. This sheik must have gone to heaven and wasted time on his journey. Once upon a time, there were years, and the pasture of Aman, and the Murtatha of the common people, and the Sultan had no news. Salem has become more and more old and tired, his back is bent and his hand is shaking, but there is not a single word on his tongue. The traveler will come, he will come inevitably. Then a great calamity befell Baghdad, and severe drought occurred in the city. The rain did not fall, the crops dried up, and the prices of grains rose to the level of the speaker. The people who yesterday were selling money or bread from Salem's cup now themselves need the pill. The market movement ended, the rich closed their coffers, and the hearts of thought became cold. This time for Salem was a little less than the resurrection. Before, he was limited to praying once or twice a day. Or now, he has been hungry for 2 days, his body has become dry, every bone is dry, and his stomach is stuck to his back from the intensity of the air, he is struggling, and he is constantly turning around. On a very cold night, Salem Makamesh was under his old tree. He had not tasted the ugliness for 3 days. The air was tearing apart the intestines of the people in front of him while they were talking about the city's turmoil, and in that moment, Salem Kater's heart came to mind. His hand went to the bundle tied to Hassana's waist. The stones inside were solid and sharp. Satan whispered to Aduna, Salem, why are you dying? Perhaps that traveler lied. Maybe it is not stones, but something precious. If you open it, look at it, and sell a small thing from it, your life will be spared, perhaps that of the traveler Katamat and Aniyarja. Yedsalam went to the bedside table, his fingers were shaking inside, he said, open it, but his conscience was screaming, don't think for a moment. If there was valuable money, perhaps he could relieve hunger, perhaps buy a small house, and perhaps escape this cold and humiliation. Only once did he think to open it, and he placed the navel in his lap and began to untie the knot with his trembling fingers, but at the moment when the knot was about to be untied, he remembered the voice of that traveler, the Sultan. Please, do not pick this navel for anyone and do not open it to anyone. Salem pulled his hand and they came back, with tears flowing from my eyes. He tied the navel once again around his waist and began to blame herself. He said, "No, I will starve to death, but I will betray the trust. I have promised God." If that traveler comes 10 years later, he will find his trust as he left it. I did not lose my life on the day the shop owner, who was near the tree under which he had been sitting for years, pushed him away and said, "Oh Sheik, go away from here. Your ominous face keeps customers away. Go and die in another place." There was no quickening or slowing down for the answer until I left. Outside the city, to the desolate ruins, there was neither ceiling nor walls, but only broken stones and wild dogs. The cold, the heat, and the rain were attacking his old body directly, but that bundle became to you that it was part of his skin. It was tightly tied to his waist and was dragging him along his body. The rope entered the flesh and the blood became a stream, but Salem did not loosen it. One night, some of the young men, Al-Salem Lahudu, saw that this sheik was very careful about his waist. They said, "This sheik must have something wrong. Otherwise, why would he put his hand on his waist when he was in such a torn state?" They approached him and said, "Sheik, get out of your way." Salem said, trembling, "I don't have anything to build. I only have a traveler's safe house with stones in it." He did not believe the hammer. They started hitting him with kicks and punches. Maskud was terrified, and they beat him a lot, but Salem curled up like an animal on top of the bundle, and he shouted at it, "Kill Anshit, but let us give this trust to him." He did not follow his path very much, but when he saw that he was brought back to death and did not leave the bundle, and that it seemed to be solid, all stones also, they said that he was crazy, and he spat on him and they went. Salem remained lying in his blood, his body was breaking from the pain, but on his face there was a strange poisonous pimple before the bundle, and he looked at the hearing and said, "You have all the praises today as well." His hair and his life became filled with dust because people used to know me. He became the vilest and most despicable person in the city. He was often guided in a coma. That traveler will come. He will come. Passers-by were talking about one of the comings other than death. But Salem did not know that the hour of his examination had been prepared for that traveler who had promised before he was created. It was 5 years ago that a long contract had been concluded on the land of Baghdad, but did Sultan Asfar mention that poor old man, and you mentioned her, could they recognize this corpse lying in ruins? After 5 long years, Sultan Asfar returned to Baghdad from Hajj and other campaigns. They decorated the whole city, every bride, the drum was beating everywhere, and people went up to the rooftops to get one look at their king. But between this brilliance and the noise in the palace, the Sultan's heart was attached to another place. They remembered his count, and he remembered that poor General Sheik, and he did not enter the palace until he coughed on the minister. "Are the conditions of the city fine?" The minister said, "In the past few years, the arrogant people have caused great devastation, causing a lot of poverty and destroying many homes. Now conditions have begun to improve, but the surgery takes time to devour the joy of the Sultan's heart. Rudeness and devastation came to his mind immediately. Salem's face. Was that poor, working, helpless man able to survive this calamity? The Sultan could not be patient. He was not satisfied even with the comfort of the same night, wearing again the old traveler's clothing. The same dusty clothes and the same reproachful face did not leave the royal door, but rather through the small door and headed toward the market. The market had returned to some activity, but the eyes of the Sultan were searching for that old tree. When he arrived, the place was empty, and there was no poor person. The seller of new fruits, we might look like he was drowning in the heart of the Sultan. I will trade soon, brother. He was here poor in the year of the Sheikh. His name is Salem, meaning Nawa. We heard that he was lying in ruins outside the city. Perhaps you were not there. Why are you asking about him? Why did the Sultan decide? He went immediately and went to the ruins outside the city. His heart was beating strongly. He felt the fear of the stranger. Is this poor man miserable because of the trust he left with him? When he arrived in the ruins, he faced a strange silence and an unpleasant smell. The place was quiet and they could only hear the sound of the wind. Sultan lit a torch and the people looked around. Salem, Salem, called Sultan. No answer came. He moved forward a little behind a broken wall, with clothes piled up near the torch. And when he saw the sight, the ground slipped from under his feet. There was no human being. Oh my God, all of the bones were not left on my body. There was nothing left on my body. The clothes were torn and the hair was torn. Why were they covering me with dirt? A man was lying in motion as if he had died. The Sultan approached with trembling steps and a fresh bow. He was safe. The mother of his axe was running like a thread, very weak and very slow, but the thing that amazed the Sultan more than anything was that Anselm, even in a coma, was clutching his entire hand on his stomach. He was holding the basket tied around his waist so tightly that his nails dug into his skin. As blood fell, the Sultan prevented me. He gently put his hand on Salem's shoulder and said, "Sut, the one who was talking, oh, Baba, fight." A slightly intact body. After years of sleep, no one called him out of love. He tried with difficulty to open his blind eyes, but the movement of his dry lips did not refute them. Whose voice was weaker in me than the breath of air? The Sultan bowed down when he called him and said, "O father, I am that traveler. I have returned him. I have come to take my trust. Your justice has not been broken." Until it was like lightning that passed through that dying body. A light appeared on Salem's face. It was a lamp that shone in the dark room. He felt his trembling hands calling Sultan and said, "Masafir Kalisal, its habitats, you came, I was in pain, that you would come." People used to say, "How much have you come?" And they used to say, "I am crazy," but it was a coincidence. So Salem tried with all his strength to open the pipe from his stomach. His hands were trembling and he clenched his fingers. So he tapped them, "My son, Salem." He said, "My fingers did not work. You open yourself and see your honesty as it is." I did not open it and did not give birth to a single seed. I remained hungry, but I did not break the promise. When the Sultan opened the pipe, he saw that it was wet. With blood and ashes, the path did not become velvety, but became as if it were a part of my body, safe and tearful from a sultan who, while he was a king, took a cruel suicide from a poor man. The Sultan took the blood-stained clasps in his hands. They were no longer just a bag of pliers, but became an example of honesty and loyalty that perhaps had never been matched before in history. The Sultan saw Ana Ampaz al-Salem picking up injustice and filth, or prayed to the door of death, so the Sultan immediately put the sharat in his pocket and carried Al-Salam's withered body in his bosom. "Hold on tight, O fool, tell the Sultan, your stickiness will never happen again." The Sultan emerged from the ruins carrying the poor man in my arms. Outside were his soldiers and his minister who were protecting him. They were lying towards him, and when he saw that their king was carrying a dirty beggar, a foul-mouthed person in his lap, what would he do? "Hand him over to us," the minister said as he advanced. The Sultan looked at the vizier angrily and said, "How is it that someone should touch him? This is not an ordinary beggar. As of today, he is in his rage. Summon the royal doctors to the palace immediately." Something happened to the sheikh, and an entire city was burned. He carried Sultan Salim himself to the palace. He was woven into the royal bathroom, packed a velvet robe, and placed a blanket on his finest hair. The royal doctors did all they could. And the gift of precious medicines and tonic broths remained safe and sound in medicine. As a sultan, he left all matters of government and lay down on his bed, wanting to ashes. He would say, "This is unleavened bread," when they open his eyes. On the third day, Al-Salam's body moved slightly. He opened his blind eyes and felt a strange smell around him, the smell of perfume and incoming. The harsh ground did not have a soft bed of flowers around the piece to destroy falsehood. His hand immediately went to his stomach. He screamed in horror, "Amana, where is the traveler? Where has Amana gone?" The Sultan made a sankraba, so he came forward and held him with his trembling hands. "Calm down, Baba," the Sultan said, "there is trust in kindness, just as Hafuda is in my eyes. You know peace by the sound." He said, "O traveler, are you where we are? This place seems to you to be paradise. Have you died?" The Sultan smiled and said, "No, Baba, you are alive and you are not in heaven, but in the royal palace in Baghdad." The royal palace, Fateh Salam, looked at his mouth and said, "I am." Al-Salam said, "I am poor, mother. What should I do in the royal palace when you were traveling, Adaya? How did you get here?" The Sultan and I took a deep breath. "It is time to kick star," he said, "Babe. I am not traveling, I am the king of Baghdad, the Sultan and Zahran." I did not sleep on this Assam until the color of his face changed and it began to tremble with fear. They tried to get off the bed and fell at his feet, praying and praying. "Have mercy on me, what is my mistake? I have fulfilled your trustworthiness. I did not steal anything." The Sultan caught him and sat him on the bed again. There was tears in the Sultan's eyes. He said in a heavy suit, "No, babe. Pardon I must ask. I deceived you and lied. That bundle I gave you had no stones in it." Al-Salam was amazed and looked at the Sultan, even though he could not see him, but his face was full of questions. He said they were not stones, so what was in them and why did you make this joke with a poor illiterate person? The Sultan clapped, and a servant came to carry a gold plate. The Sultan took that old bundle stained with blood and sweat. He placed it in Al-Salam's hands and said, "Open the cloak now. I have the strength to open it and see if you have been careful for 5 years while risking your life." She was trembling and opened the door slowly, and her button did not open until it alarmed everyone in the room. Stones fell from the bundle, red, numb, and white on the bed. The royal revolution was dying. It was shining for you. The stars descended from the heavens to the earth. They were not the stones of Adia, they were the rarest diamonds, highs, and jewels from the king's treasury. Its value was enough to buy the king's spear. Salam could not see, but his fingers knew the truth. He began to touch the stones with trembling hands. They were cold and hard, but touching them told him that they were not an enemy horse. Sultan Zahran placed his hand on Salem's hands and said, "This is the wealth for which the king after them will kill some." His face turned pale, and there was a strange feeling in the room. It was once a new bloodshed from Salem's eyes, and he began to cry intensely. He said while sobbing, "Diamonds mean that for 5 years I carried death tied around my waist. What did I do if I became poor for a year? I longed for 2 loaves of bread. I slept on piles of garbage. People were kicking me and I had enough wealth to buy the whole city." Salem's crying was tearing hearts apart. He said while crying, "If I had been in pain because there was a diamond in it, maybe Satan would have tempted me. Maybe I would have sold 1 diamond to ease my feelings. You have put me to a great test. If my faith had been shaken, in what way would I have met God?" The Sultan came forward and uncastled him. The Sultan's eyes were full of blood, too. The Sultan said, "This is exactly what I wanted to see. When a person has nothing, faith is easy, but when he has enormous wealth, and he stays awake, meaning he sleeps with bait, and he does not betray his trust, for this is the true king of man." Sultan pointed to the diamonds scattered on the ground and said, "Look, look. All over the world, people are afraid of my wealth or covet it. Ministers and soldiers may betray at any moment, but you have proven that the world is deprived of people who are still alive and can die without betraying their consciences." Salem's blood reached his mouth and he said, "But what about these diamonds? It's your trust. Take it twice again," and he was afraid. "He told me to play for 5 years, and he meant it because he was glorious. I was afraid that someone would steal it." The Sultan smiled and said, "I want these diamonds to be given to her female companions, so everyone can take them. I only gave them to her to see if she should be worthy of them or not." Kad Japsel's article, "What do you care about me? Tell the Sultan that I am an old man. I have great wealth, but there are very few people who can be trusted. I was looking for someone in whose hands I could put the key to my guest, someone who would be very satisfied with him. And I did not find anyone in a kingdom more worthy than you." He knelt down and asked an article. "It is not possible for me to be poor. If I covet gold, give me only the place of the old one under that tree. I want the cloth, the silk, and the diamonds. All of this is done by a human being. If I were blind in my eyes, I would want to blind my heart." The Sultan was moved more by Al-Salem's words and said, "You will restore the tree as a whole. But today you must accept my decision. You have kept my trust, and now it is my duty to protect you." I sent Sultan to the minister, and he presented the decrees of the 2 kings. The Sultan said, "O father, from today you will not be just a treasurer of the city, but the guest of the 2 kings, and I will give you a gift greater than all these diamonds." I will ask Salem, "And what is it?" The Sultan said, "Justice." The Muddal of Mecca, and with your excellency on Sultan tomorrow there will be 2 kings' councils and a seat of peace on 2 seats equal to the Arshi and Sirah of the entire Gadid. The crown of the true king was hidden in the bag of the poor man his mother the next day. One council was filled with the hostility of the 2 kings to another. Ministers, merchants, princes, military commanders, and every important person in the city were sitting in places. Everyone was wondering why the Sultan had returned to this very special council. Then the drums beat, and first the Sultan Al-Zahran came. The Sultan sat on the throne, but the chair next to it was not only empty, but it was the chair, and the minister did not dream of seeing it. Salem sat on it, wearing a white silk dress, his face dusty, but he was a polytheist, and his head was held high with pride. Although his eyes were still blind, they were now clear. People began to worry about me and wonder. This is the poor, crazy person who used to reverence the immorality. How can he reverence the Sultan of Jan with a poisonous sultan? They are protected from ruin outside the city. The Sultan raised his hand and the council remained silent and said in a loud voice, "O Baghdad, you thought that this blind and crazy sheikh was you, and you used to ignore him and despise him, but today I will show you who is the real worker." The Sultan placed himself in front of everyone, degrading the precious stones, so that he would come to the house with manes and groves. The Sultan said, "This wealth has been tied on this poor man's back for the past 5 years. While you were selling your faith in times of famine, this man was sleeping hungry, but he did not touch this wealth. He did not betray my trust so that I could find his hunger satisfied." A mutasm al-Majal spread it all, and like those who mocked Salem were ashamed and lowered their heads until they traded. The one who flew Daisal from under the tree began to tremble in fear, for Sultan Sayahasi has repelled him today. Sultan summoned that merchant, and the merchants prostrated themselves on his knees and said, "Have mercy on them, have mercy on me. I did not know. I made a mistake." Sultan looked at Sal and said, "This man has insulted you greatly, and today the decision is in your hands. If you like, he can be expelled from the city." Around Salem, he stood in his place and extended his hand up and put his hand on the merchant's head while he was receiving her message and said, "Don't touch them, beware, no. He hit me just because he didn't understand. Maybe that's why I went to ruin, and maybe that's why I ran out. If I were in the market, maybe someone would have killed me. Everything is with God, and I don't want to hold grudges in my heart for anyone." Those present heard these words, and their eyes were filled with tears. He was poor and had nothing. His heart was bigger than the hearts of kings. Sultan Zahran was caged from his seat and his entire head was removed. Ownership and placing it on the head of Salem reduced Sultan. Today, our hill has proven that ownership cannot be compensated for by the heart. I entrusted her with a trust, but I will not keep it for myself in full. From today, all these diamonds and jewels belong to Salem. But since Salem refused to take it for himself, this wealth will be used to prepare bait for travelers in every neighborhood in Baghdad, where food and water are provided free of charge to every poor person who comes from and travels, and all of this will be in Smisalem. A smile of contentment and peace appeared on Salem's face, and he raised his face to the sky and thanked God. Since that day, Maud Salem has been residing in the palace. He asked the Sultan to let him bury him under his old trees because he was not accustomed to palaces, according to the Sultan's request, but for Maud, someone describes him as crazy. People used to come to him to pray for him. Salem sat under his trees until God's last breath while sending a message to the world that a human being's dignity is not in his harm or his sight, but in his morals, honesty, and trustworthiness. Even today in the ancient stories of Baghdad, when they mention loyalty and sincerity, they do not mention the treasure of Sultan Balt. They mention the bag of this poor man first. My dear friends, from which country are you watching this video every once in a while in this story? Share your opinions in the comments and subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next story.